our way to Cana will take, I think, half an hour, 40 minutes, no, half an hour even. So we have some time to wait before our dinner. And also, I'd like to say a couple of words about the place, the Cana of Galilee. So it was one of Jewish villages near Nazareth. So Nazareth was a small city at that time, and we'll speak about it later. And Cana was one of the, not of the suburbs, but of the Jewish villages around it. Now it's an Arab Muslim village mostly. There are several churches, so there is a small Christian population, but mostly it's Muslim. And it was a place of the first miracle of Jesus. You remember well that it was a marriage. It was a marriage of someone of the relatives or a friends of a neighbors, probably, of Mary, of the Mother of God. And she was invited to this marriage. And the Gospel says that Jesus came there with his mother, but also he had his disciples with him already. So it was in the very beginning of his ministry, because it was, as he told, it was not yet the time to make miracles, but he has already disciples. So it is the beginning of his ministry, and Saint Joseph was not present, so he died somewhere between the age of when Jesus was 12 years old. He is named in the Gospel when Jesus was lost in the temple, so he was 12 years old. But when Jesus is 30 years old and he has disciples already, Saint Joseph is already not in this world. It's important why Jesus started his ministry in the year when he was 30 years old. Of course, he had something to tell even before that time, I think so. But nevertheless, he had followed the biblical tradition or the biblical rule that someone may become a rabbi, may become a teacher, not earlier than 30 years old. So it was a kind of spiritual maturity, probably. So a boy was able to take part in a religious community and to pray together with the adults from the age of 12 years old. So it is the time of Jewish bar mitzvah, as you know. But one could teach in a synagogue, in a community, only from 30 years old onwards. And in ecclesiastical canon law, we have this. There is a rule that one can become a priest, one can be ordained a deacon not earlier than 25 years old, and one can be ordained priest not earlier than 30 years old. Of course, this rule was never followed really, and there are a lot of good priests who were ordained earlier. For example, the nowadays Russian Patriarch Cyril, he was ordained bishop when he was 29. So this law was not so strict, but nevertheless it was a law, that a canon law that followed the biblical tradition that was followed by Jesus. So in this feast in Cana of Galilee, first of all, Mary was invited, and Jesus was with her, and his disciples were with him. And it's very important, I think so, that this first marriage was made by, first miracle was made by Jesus during the wedding feast, not on any kind of a very especially religious ceremony, not during priestly ordination, not during something else, but on the marriage feast, during a very simple, common for everybody, such a human joy. And it's important. And also it is important that this miracle was made according to the, we can say, prayers of the Mother of God. Because Mary asked Jesus about this, and he told that it's not time for him. But nevertheless, she asked the servants to do what he will say them. So this miracle was worked by the prayers by the demand of Mother of God. It is important. So now it is a small village, with the Catholic Church on place of the ancient Byzantine Church that stood on the place of a, how is it named, Judeo-Christian synagogue. So a place for community, a small church of Jewish Christians who were living there. So it seems that probably this place of the church is standing on the place of the house, probably where this miracle was worked. There is a small Orthodox church nearby that was built in the 19th century, but normally there is one monk who is not living there all the time, so it is open mostly as a parish church. So I think it will not be open today, but it's a new one that so will visit the ancient place of that house of that miracle, where is a Catholic church standing today. The bridegroom on this marriage feast was one of the future disciples of Jesus, Simon the Canaanite, who was, his name Canaanite was, it's not a family name, but he was from Cana of Galilee. And he was one of the 12 disciples. He became one of the disciples of Jesus. And also he is named often Simon the Zealot. So he was a kind of a political extremist at the time. A terrorist probably, so they were connected with this terrorist anti-Roman movement. And it's also interesting for us that the disciples of Jesus and 12 disciples and 70 disciples, they were very, very different, and they were from very different political, cultural, educational background. So Simon was probably a neighbor of Jesus, probably a relative. That's why they were close one to another. But he was of such strange extremist political convictions. And after, as all other apostles except St. John, he was martyred during his preaching all over the world of the time, and there is tradition that he was killed when he was preaching the gospel on the shores of the Black Sea. So it was really the end of the Byzantine, of the Roman world, and he was preaching on the eastern side, eastern shores of the Black Sea, where is now the territory of Abkhazia. So it was before a part of the Russian Empire. So for Russians in the 19th century, it was important that one of the apostles was murdered and buried there. So the Russians helped in building of the small Orthodox monastery here in Cana. And it's also the place in Abkhazia where St. John the Chrysostom died. One of the, here on the left we can see Mount Tabor. It's a very beautiful one. So in Abkhazia, near the place where Simon the Canaanite was martyred, also St. John the Chrysostom died at the beginning of the 5th century, one of the most well-known patriarchs of Constantinople and one of the most well-known church fathers and one of the most fruitful authors, Christian authors in Byzantium. He was expelled there for different political reasons, we can say, and he died, he was an old man, he died there in the place named Komane, and his last words were "Glory to God for all." So very soon his relics were returned to Constantinople, and he became really one of the most well-known church fathers. On the left side of us, it's a rather typical Jewish village in Galilee. One of the first kibbutzim. Now it's not already a kibbutz, it's just a village, but it is one of the first Jewish settlements created here in the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, and they were occupied by agriculture, so they worked in agriculture, because all these lands in Galilee, near Tabor, they are very good for agriculture, and it was the first thing that Jewish settlers did. They worked in agriculture. But if we turn right, there will be very soon a road sign mentioning a small village that is standing just a kilometer from this road. The village is named Nain. And you know this place because in the Gospel you can read about the resurrection of the widow's son, the only widow's son. Jesus once was walking here with his apostles. They entered a village, Nain, that was exactly on that place where the present day Nain is situated. And he saw this funeral procession, and he asked, "Who is it?" And he was told that it is the only son of a widow. And Jesus supposed that it is not a good time for him to die, and he resurrected that boy. And it was really near these hills where we are now, a couple of kilometers from this place. Some ruins on the right side.
Please do not answer. What is the point of Christian life? Huh? Christians? You don't know what is the point of Christian life? What's the focus of Christian life? Deification, right? Yeah. So if person, theosis, theologically speaking. So you live your life, you're deified, right? You die, and church proclaim you to be what? Saint. And you remains to be what? Relics. And it's a good habit to share the relics. There should be enough relics to share, huh? Oh, boo.
Only bones, Father, only bones. Not more. So it is the earliest evidence of the existence of that city. What does it mean? That Nazareth was really a small city, unworthy of mentioning in literature and documents. So Jesus was really from a very from a very small place, and this village was much smaller than Nazareth at the time. So it was really very provincial. Now probably it's also provincial, but it's rather big. So we are living here now. We are crossing the street to the left, and we are going uphill through the Churches Street.
Скажи, чтобы были осторожны, чтобы дорогу переходить. Please be very careful as we'll be crossing the road.
There's the Cana wedding wine.
We are going.
Especially on the way back.
Says, Father Alexander says, especially on the way back. Be careful, especially on the way back after all the wine testing.
The churches in this village, and those of you who can read Latin can read that it's Domus Nathanaelis Bartholomeus Apostolis. So it is supposed to be a church connected with one of the apostles who was born here. So there were two. There was Simon, the Zealot, and there was Nathanael Bartholomeus, who was also from this small village. So there were two people from this church who joined this place, and this church now is I don't know, it's probably 18th, 19th century. Oh, but it is an old church.
In America, this would be a very old church. It's all relative.
Yeah, I just mentioned that several years ago in Megiddo, where according to the scriptures there's going to be a final battle between good and evil. But it's a town, it's a historical town, and there is an archaeological park there. Near that place there is a maximum security prison, and they were expanding the facilities, and they came upon some ruins, and in its ruins they found one of the early so-called proto-Christian churches. It didn't look like a church, it looked like an expanded facility within somebody's dwelling, somebody's villa. And there was an inscription that didn't mention the name of the donor, but it asked, as very often the dedicatory inscriptions say, that Lord, Jesus, remember in your kingdom your servant, the centurion.
Wow.
So, and first, early 2nd century, whether it's from a family of the same centurion or not, but it's very interesting, it's very striking that actually, historically, there was a Roman centurion, a centurion. You know, we know at least of two of them. You know, one who was standing at the cross of Christ, and another who come to be seen on behalf of his servant. So whether one of them or not is irrelevant, but we have a historical evidence that one of them was a Christian very, very early on. So it's not a fully developed church. And the oldest church that is known is in Aqaba. They found a very strange structure. It's on the Gulf. It's where Eilat on the Red Sea. They excavated it, but walls were built out of mud bricks and out of dirt. So they covered it up, so it's not exposed, so you cannot visit it for protection. And also they found in Pella. Pella is a little town in Jordan, where Christians escaped after the destruction of Jerusalem, actually a little bit prior to it. So Pella. And under one of the churches during the excavations they found some opening in the floor, and they went into the cave, and everybody forget the memory of that cave. And they found evidence, lamps and inscriptions from the 1st century in Aramaic that Christians were there and were praying there. And it's considered to be the oldest known liturgical gathering of Christians. But unfortunately, it's off limits, so you cannot visit. But sure, archaeological discoveries, more and more things come to light, so that's...
You're right. These are really early churches.
Early churches. Old.
No. How many C's do I
One
have?
C.
No,
Three
it's not
Cs.
one C. It's 3 C's.
3 C's,
20.
1 L,
Oh, so
3
it's
X's.
1859.
So it's 1,800.
59.
No.
56.
16.
54.
No.
Go ahead, read.
50, 60, 70, 1880.
1880. 80, exactly.
I was close enough.
Exactly. So it's really a very recent church.
Stay together.
A Catholic church
Walter.
built proto-Christian churches. I think that he meant Judeo-Christian synagogues or Judeo-Christian gathering houses. So it was places for meeting of Christians who are Christians but who follow the biblical tradition as the apostles did. So it was Jewish Christianity. And many of Byzantine churches they built over these Judeo-Christian synagogues. Judeo-Christian church. There was an inscription about this meeting place that was written in Aramaic. So it was connected with the Jewish community, the Jewish Christian community. Because Jews living in the land of Israel at the time, they spoke 2 languages. And Jesus himself, he spoke 2 languages. They spoke Hebrew for reasons of prayer. And in Judea, Hebrew was spoken as an allied language. And in Galilee, mostly Aramaic language was spoken. So they had to know both languages. But the difference was not so great. So Hebrew is Hebrew and Aramaic is a kind of a pidgin English. So Semitic language understandable to different Semitic peoples. So here is the church. I think that we may come down through the excavations.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
They're not bad. And the salt.
Okay. I'll cover the rest.
Cover them up. I mean, no, cover.
mosaic, it was just a covering for a floor. And sometimes it could be from rather big stones of the same color. Sometimes it could be with ornament. So it depends on the possibilities of the owners of the house. Согласно, значит, вот мы с вами когда там вот проходили, и здесь это каменный сосуд, использованный древними евреями. Почему? Понятно, что сосуды проще делать глиняные, как греки делали. Вот. Но глиняный сосуд может стать ритуально нечистым. А в иудаизме очень много связано с представлениями о том, что чистое, что нечистое. А каменный сосуд не может становиться ритуально нечистым. Поэтому делать его сложнее. Но для очищения иудейских делались часто сосуды каменные, потому что они как бы вот всегда были чисты. Так что это один из вот таких иудейских сосудов.
Копия или это оригинал?
Это оригинал. Я думаю, что это оригинал.
Кто сказал, что это копия того, что в Берлине находится?
Нет, это, таких сосудов же много. Другое дело, что совершенно как бы не факт, что это вот тот сосуд, в котором Господь притворил вино, конечно.
In Judaism, there are very many things that can make a jar, for instance, made out of clay unclean, and it's very essential for everything that is used in life, not necessarily on the religious ritual, but whole life was a religious ritual, to be necessary clean. So for that, it was a much complicated process of where jars for water that were used for drinking purposes and for purification purposes were made out of stone, because it's impossible to make a volume made out of stone to be unclean. And of course, nobody says that that's exactly the one in which Christ made water into wine. But it's very similar because it's come from the same place and same time. Now, of course, there are three other places that can claim the name of Cana. Cana is probably, the location of Cana is one of the most controversial places of all the places. But we know for sure, because of the inscription in Aramaic, because of the founding of these jars, that there was a village in this place. And as these jars were found here and not in other places, the assumption was made that there was a significant enough Jewish community who could afford to have such volumes for water. And it's not an unreasonable guess to say that not only the early Christians were here, but that this place is the Cana that is mentioned in the Gospel. And again, even in the early times, there were names of towns and villages that were rather similar. You might have Springfield, Massachusetts, Springfield, whatever, Missouri, or other places. So there are many places with somewhat similar names. And when we're talking about the Gospel, you're thinking city, town, they were all very, very small villages. So, and you see how distances are very short, and you see how everything is very close in Jerusalem and everything. So we're thinking in terms of, you know, if not European, American sizes, when we're European sizes. But in fact, everything was a day's walk from one place to the other. And, you know, Lord sanctified a very insignificant geographical place, and the magnitude was revealed, you know, under very tight geographical circumstance. So why won't we then read the Gospel, maybe, of the miracle?
Yes.
Huh? Would be befitting place.
Jesus made this miracle. So probably it's also a part of the foundation of the house and later of the church. Here we can see as big walls were made at the time. Here we have 2 rows of stones and some dust, some earth some dollars, there was some of the stones.
Archaeological excavation on the money. Funding archaeology.
And this is your new girlfriend?
No, wife, for 36.